I started out when we were living in Massachusetts, I was a preschool teacher. And boy, if you don't get along with art in preschool, then you're kind of in trouble because the kids are just so into it and it's constantly changing. We moved out here in 2003 to Michigan, and I didn't know anybody, and my children were in school. So my son was in high school, and I started going to the cross-country meets, and there were a number of people taking pictures, and they put together a slideshow at the end of the season. Of course, at that point, there was still a lot of film cameras. There were some people who had digital. You could take your stuff to a CVS and get it put on a disc. So I did that for the slideshow, and then right after that, I asked for a digital camera that I got, and so that sort of started my whole foray into it. So I signed up for Taylor Jacobson's watercolor class, and that got me involved with some other people that were doing art. And I also went to some programs. At that point, there was a program in town called The Artist Among Us, which was at the library, and that was really fun. And I went to a program where a woman, Bridget Ezard, was hand coloring black and white photos. And I thought, that's really cool. However, she was trained in a very classical darkroom paper system where you use oil paints and you rub them in, and it's a very old style. And I thought, well, with all the digital things that are going on, maybe there's something I could do with that. And it took me a while to find people that were experimenting on digital paper and how were they doing it. And of course, it took a while before they were coming in the industry to figure out how long digital papers were going to last and what was happening. So I found a book by a man named James McInnes, and he just had been doing race cars and sports scenes and wasn't happy with the hand tinting, felt it was too light and just didn't have the vibrancy that he wanted, and he just started putting more and more oil paint on. And so I thought, well, you know what, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And then in the meantime, I discovered a number of books that they were doing pastels and image transfers and lots of different things with their photographs. And so that sort of started me down another entire route of cutting and weaving and pasteling on things and image transferring, which is really fun. And then I found 212. And when I found 212, immediately when I came in and I showed them some things, they were like, oh, can you teach a class? Can you teach a class? And that started me down the road at 212. Basically what I do is I try to pick a photograph that I like the subject, that I feel that might either be completely covered with paint or it might just be a pop of color. I may just want to paint a certain part of it. And there's two different techniques. One where you basically completely obliterate the photograph. It's very hard to tell that it's there. And then there's another one that's more of a hand tinting where a lot of the photograph shows through or there's less paint applied. I take the photograph, I generally take in color. And what I do is on Photoshop, I turn it into a black and white photograph. And so I try to get rid of a lot of the mid-tones and the real darks, because if you're going to paint over it, it generally helps to not have the darks. So as a black and white print, it wouldn't look very good, but knowing that I'm going to add paint to it, it's okay. And what I do is I either do a print with my own inkjet printer, or if I'm looking at a larger medium, I go to a Sam's Club or Costco or somewhere where they print large. And what I paint with are water-soluble oil paints. It's a fairly recent thing. The reason I went with them is they're quicker drying, and you can thin them and you can clean up with soap and water. This is my first show, and in trying to decide on a theme, I have so many photographs and a number of paintings and a number of photo weavings and other image transfers and a lot of things. And so picking out of all those was becoming really difficult, and I was putting a stress on myself. And up until like November, I kept saying, I'm supposed to be having a show. And then I said, oh, you know what, it's coming. You are having a show, you better get really firm on what you're doing. So I have for years been putting on Facebook either a daily photo or something with a quote. And I thought, you know what, that brings everything together, so I can have my Cape Cod stuff, I can have my Michigan things, we went over to Edinburgh. All those things come together because the quotation that goes with it runs a theme through everything. You know, I could pick favorite pieces and I didn't have to worry about what went with what, because the quotation theme was going to run all the way through it. And I really enjoyed going back and looking through the photographs, and while it may have been a favorite one, sometimes another one called to me because of the quotation. I really like this one downstairs that has it's a silhouetted tree with a swing, and I know that just over the hill is the ocean, and it's one of those places that, you know, I call it, you know, take time. And it's one of those things where I say, oh, you know, it's summertime. You should really take time to sit in that swing and just, you know, let life happen around you. It's always a process, and I'm evolving as an artist. It's taken me a long time to call myself an artist because I always thought of myself as a teacher. And it's really nice to be here at the 212 where I can combine those two things. That really has made me feel like I'm at home, because both of those things are happening in my life, and they're happening because of 212.
This has been an SCTN production.